Hello and welcome. I'm Pastor Bobby, lead pastor of Community Fellowship Church here in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. It's our hope that this talk is going to be an encouragement for you on your spiritual journey. We do believe that you can have a spiritual connection with God, a personal connection, and that Jesus is your link to that. It's actually our goal for people at CFC to become committed followers of Christ, and we think these online talks are a great resource for you, but not a replacement for being part of a local community, a church. And so we want to encourage you to be plugged into a church somewhere where you are. But if you're ever in Lancaster, we'd love for you to come and visit us in person at some point. And you're welcome to check out more on our church at our website, communityfellowship.com. Hopefully this talk can be inspiring for you. We hope that you can enjoy it today.
Good morning, everybody. How you guys doing on this rainy day? Everybody doing okay? Yes? So my name's Jason. I'm one of the pastors here at CFC. If it's your first time, we're glad you're here. Thanks for spending part of your day with us, worshiping. You hear the rain. It's beautiful. So I have 3 daughters, 16, 19, and 21. I'll tell you a little story about when I was a young father. Now, before I was a young father, I was really into pranking with my buddies. We had kind of tight group of friends, and maybe you're like that. And when we used to do all these crazy things to each other, now you would think that once we got married and started having kids that we would kind of put those childish ways aside. But when you have children, when you got babies, that's new material for pranking, right? So you have, picture you're at a friend's house, a buddy's house, and you're changing one of those nasty diapers, right? What do you do with that? I'm going to tell you what you can do with that thing. There's so many possibilities. That's like a little time bomb that you wrap up. You can slide that under the couch. You can put it in an empty cookie jar. The little decorative bowl that has the sparkly balls in it, you can put it right in the centerpiece. I'm going to tell you, how about a hot car on a July afternoon under the driver's seat? There is powerful things happen when you let an infant diaper marinate in a hot car for a couple of hours. Everything looks fine, right, from the outside, and then you open that driver's side door, and boom, it's offensive. And, offensive to your nose. As we've been seeing for Israel, that similar thing was true. Like, sin is like marinating in the camp. Rebellion is heating up, like, among the people. And it's becoming this offense to God. It's impacting the closeness that they have with God. And so the big idea that we're going to explore today is that the greatest threat to closeness with God is not from the outside. It's actually inside. Once you hit chapter 25, let me just tell you kind of where Israel is. They're just a few miles away from the promised land, about 7 miles east of the Jordan, about 5 miles north of the Dead Sea. They're just right there. That's so close, but they're not quite there yet. This has been a journey that's been happening for decades now, and they're almost there. And throughout those decades, what we've seen is that God has been faithful to them. He's been personal. Every single day, he's providing food for them. Their clothes, the Bible says their clothes aren't even wearing out, right? You're getting water from impossible places like rocks. He is this pillar of fire. He is this pillar of smoke. Like the Google Maps, he's telling them where to go, when to stop, when to rest. He is their protection from enemies like the Amalekites. So we just see God show up in very definitive ways. And the problem is that with all of that provision, it had not trickled down into their hearts and rooted them in God. Like they wanted more than God. And so you just see these cycles of rebellion through most of the Old Testament. You see, and some of the big popular ones. Do you know this? It was just about a 2-week journey, a little less than 2-week journey. They could have been in the Promised Land in 2 weeks, but they got scared. They're like, there's giants living in this land. And so they made plans. They rebelled. They made plans to go back to Egypt. And we know that you're probably familiar with the 10 Commandments story, right? Moses goes up for about 40 days, and they're like, hey, they get impatient, and they make this kind of golden god to worship. And then just a couple of weeks ago, there's another rebellion. Korah is attempts a coup on Moses and his people. And he's got this backing. And each time what happens is that God gets angry at the rebellion. He fumes. He puts a stop to it, and as a result, people die. Right? It's not, and that cycle, but that cycle of disobedience continues. And you might say, you're looking at this, and if you read through the Old Testament for the first time, you're like, God, why are you doing this? Why are you allowing this cycle to happen over and over and over again? And you have to look back to Genesis 12 to see the origin of that promise. He tells Abraham, the father of their people, he says this in Genesis 12. I'm going to make you into a great nation. I will bless you. I will make your name great, and you will be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you. I will curse those who curse you. All the peoples of the earth are going to be blessed through you. So, boiled down, he's like, you're going to be big people. And that happens, right? They are massive. The Exodus is a massive group of people. So that part comes true. He says, you're going to take in my blessing, my provision, my protection. And again, it's happening. Actually, even just last week, what happened, right? So the king of Moab tells Balaam, he hires Balaam to go up to these mountaintops and to rain down these curses. I want you to curse these people, right? They're freaked out by this massive group of people. And so Balaam can't do it, right? All he can do is just speak blessings out to them. It's like they have this invisible dome of protection around them. And it's like as if the people are impenetrable from the outside, right? But then now look at this last part. All the peoples of the earth are going to be blessed through you. That he's saying, you are going to be the carriers of my blessing. You're going to be my ambassadors of love. Hey guys, I'm going to change the world through you. Pretty cool, right? And that's the hard part. It's like God's mission statement, right? I want to change the world. I'm going to use you all to do it. That's his mission statement for his people. And that's what they really wrestle with. Israel's greatest threat, it's not the outside people. It's not the outside enemies. It's inside the dome. That's where the problem is happening. And you're going to see, we're about to jump into Numbers 25. We're going to dive in, and it is a spicy one, okay? And so get ready. If you have not read ahead, buckle up. God's faithfulness is easily forgotten. Here we go. While Israel was staying in Shittim, the men began to indulge in sexual immorality with Moabite women, who invited them to their sacrifices, to their gods. The people ate the sacrificial meal and bowed down before these gods. So Israel yoked themselves to the Baal of Peor. And the Lord's anger burned against them. The Lord said to Moses, take all the leaders of these people, kill them, and expose them in broad daylight before the Lord, so that the Lord's fierce anger may turn away from Israel. So Moses said to Israel's judges, each of you must put to death those of your people who have yoked themselves to the Baal of Peor. Then an Israelite man brought into the camp a Midianite woman right before their eyes. The eyes of Moses and the whole assembly of Israel, while they were weeping at the entrance to the tent of meeting. So when Phinehas, the son of Eleazar, the son of Aaron the priest, saw this, he left the assembly, took a spear in his hand, followed the Israelite into the tent. He drove the spear into both of them, right through the Israelite man and into the woman's stomach. Then the plague against the Israelites was stopped, but those who died in the plague numbered 24,000. The Lord said to Moses, Phinehas, son of Eleazar, the son of Aaron, the priest, has turned my anger away from the Israelites. Since he was zealous for my honor among them as I am, I did not put an end to them in my zeal. Therefore, tell him I'm making a covenant of peace with him. He and his descendants will have a covenant of a lasting priesthood because he was zealous for my honor, for the honor of his God, and he made atonement for the Israelites. So here's a summary. It's a lot. Here's the summary of what's happening. The men are being enticed by the Moabite and Midianite women, right? And they're doing all types of scandalous stuff with them. So God is getting angry. And he tells Moses, I want you to kill all the leaders that are associated with this, and I want you to make an example of them. Thousands of people are dying of a plague. They're dropping dead. And it's like a national tragedy, and Moses and his contingency are outside the tent of meeting, and they're weeping because it got really bad really fast. As they are mourning and weeping this tragedy, this Israelite dude rolls up with a Midianite woman on his arm, not skulking around, not secretive, brazen act of rebellion. And he's going into the tent to worship Baal, right? So I mean, they're doing some stuff. There's some certain acts that are involved in worshiping Baal, illicit acts, and they're a little bit scandalous. And so Phinehas, the son of Aaron, he goes in, he grabs a spear, kills them, and God does this. Great job, Phinehas. Okay, well, there's a lot. That's heavy. There's a lot going on in this one. The big headline is, if you're to summarize this, Israel is switching teams. That's the big headline. And I want to point out three things about this as we unpack this text. God's response to them, number one, God's response is it's not about race. This is about righteousness. Okay? So I know there's a lot of talk of Midianites and Moabites. This is not about the genetic lines and keeping them pure. That's not what he's worried about. He's trying to keep their hearts pure. That's what he wants. He warns them in Exodus 34. He tells them, he's like, man, don't get too cozy while you guys are traveling through the wilderness. Don't get too cozy with the other people, right? Because he says, quote, they prostitute themselves to their gods, they sacrifice to them, and they will invite you to do the same thing. So he's like, hey, keep your distance. I'm calling you out as a unique people. Don't become like them. And God tells them, like, I am making you into a unique people. You are going to be the one and only God worshipers. That's how I want you to be known, right? The one and only. These other ones they're worshiping all kinds of other crazy gods. You're going to be the one and only God worshipers, the Jehovah worshipers. And so Baal was like it's like this competing god. He was this fertility god, and so worshiping Baal involved all these type of illicit acts, sexual acts, and it says that in the process, what was making God angry was it that sleeping around? Yeah, but it was more than that. It was, what they were doing is actually, it says yoking themselves in verse 3. Israel was yoking themselves to another god. And they were worshiping another god. They were joining themselves to a false god. So, and you guys remember 10 Commandments, right? The number one commandment is what? Thou shalt have no other gods before me. Only me. That was the number one commandment. Me. You're going to worship me alone. And here you see them. They're breaking this like fundamental commandment. He's like, I want you to be unique in the world. And they want, but Israel, they want more, right? They want more. The big idea, again, it's the greatest threat is the closeness with God. It's not from those outside. It's not from the outside people. It's the hearts, the wandering hearts of the people. And the switching teams, this is kind of the second kind of point that I want to get across here. The switching teams thing, it's not accidental. It's not like, oh, shoot, we crossed over the line. And it's also not overnight. It's a slow seduction process that happens. If you jump ahead to chapter 31, Balaam, the prophet, he shows up again. And we find out that Balaam is a little bit responsible for this. And you remember, like, dude didn't get paid. because he went up to these 3 different mountaintops. He could not rain down the curses, so he's got to find a way to get paid. And so he gives advice to these kings and these leaders, and he says, man, let's not be about cursing and pushing them away or fighting them. Let's invite them in. Just welcome them in. He figured out their weakness. Just welcome them in. Welcome them, draw them in and get them to be like us, right? That was what he was doing. So the greatest threat was not the swords of the other nations. It was Israel's willingness to fold themselves in to the surrounding culture. That was the most dangerous thing. It was a slow thing. Draw them in slowly. And it really, for modern Christians, right, it's like we can camouflage ourselves in the culture. And that camouflaging can be a slow, drifting process. It's not overnight. It's not a single decision. It's a series of decisions. And the tricky part about folding ourselves or camouflaging ourselves into the culture is that the voices of the culture, and there are many of them, they tell very, 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 very convincing lies. Lies that compete with God, lies that want to push us and draw us away from God. So David Brooks is, you might know this name, he's a popular cultural commentator, op-ed columnist, he's an author. He is not a Christian. I heard him speak. He was talking about reflecting on his failed marriage and his kids, like going through college, moving away, and just the loneliness of middle age, right? He was kind of in that, reflecting on that. And he said, so in the loneliness, is like, I'm not married, my kids are away. Like, he just dove into work to find more meaning and purpose, right? Just went in, I'm going to be the best I can be. And he realized in that process, he discovered kind of what he called 3 cultural voices that are lies, like these 3 lies. For him, the 3 lies were that career success is fulfilling. He's like, yeah, that's a lie. The second one, that I can determine to make myself happy. He goes, that's a lie, that's fleeting. And that I can earn my way to love through accomplishments or whatever. And again, he's like, that doesn't work either. And his big conclusion was that he's like, economic freedom is great. Political freedom, awesome. Love America. But he said, the social freedom in America is a nightmare. He goes, because it just puts us adrift in the sea. He said the adrift man is the unrooted man is the adrift man, if you're not rooted. The unrooted man is the unremembered man because he's uncommitted to things. He's like, we like to think that freedom is like this ocean that we swim in, but he said it's actually a river that you're supposed to cross so you can plant yourself to another side. This is a secular guy saying this. He's like, there's not a whole lot of meaning in the voices lie, man. The voices of our culture. So, and you remember what this is where we see Israel. Like they're kind of like slowly drifting away, unrooted from the promises of God, rejecting God's identity for them, His mission statement for them. They don't want it, and he gets angry at that. He's angry. Remember what he says in Genesis 12, that third promise. All the peoples of the earth are going to be blessed through you. He's like, I'm going to make you into this incredible lighthouse of love. And you're going to show all these other surrounding nations how great I am, how great my name is. What's happening in Israel is that the bulbs of the lighthouse are burning out. And so God responds in a big way. So let's talk about his anger and his wrath for a second. That's fun, right? Well, this is his. We don't like to talk about this, but really, it's a function of his holiness. God is holy. It's his number one attribute, and really, it means he is set apart. He doesn't hate the people. It's sin. He is set apart. It says, 1 John says, God is light. In him is no darkness at all. Picture that. Can you even picture that? That God is light, not like light. He is light. There can be no darkness in him at all. And so then he can't, as a function of that, like there's this intolerance towards sin. He can't be near it. He has to distance himself from it. He hates sin. And so he hates sin because God radiates goodness and power and love, and he designs his people to do the same thing, right? So you and I, like, we've been designed to radiate goodness and power and love in communion with him. And so God is loving. He is merciful. Yes. But he's like, hey, I've given you a purpose. I've given you identity. You're not adrift. I gave you a mission statement. Follow it. Like, follow it. And when we fail to do that, yes, he's loving and merciful, but he can bring anger. He can bring punishment. It's an expression of his love and justice. In Exodus 32, he's saying, I'm going to keep my promises to my people, right? But when it comes time for me to punish, I will punish if they sin. So, speaking of punishment, let's talk about this Phineas character for a second. Now, Phineas, he could be like an entire sermon in and of himself, but we could wrap one around him. That entire scene is pretty wild, right? With the whole spear and the killing, and it might appear strange that God is praising a man for killing, spearing a couple, and there's a lot. Again, I'm just going to limit it to 3 things because of time that I want to say just about that little portion. The first thing is that whenever you read a historical narrative, which is what we're doing in the book of Numbers, that a historical narrative is not intended to be a prescription for the present, okay? So this is just a description of a very distinct description of a unique event in the lives of people that are very peculiar. And so this is not meant for us to be a roadmap to how to handle the future, how to handle sin. Second thing is that when you look at Phineas's radical response with the spear, they said it was a zeal, that response should give us a clue to the level of threat, to their bad behavior, the bad behavior of Israel. It was an existential threat to them. Like, they were switching teams. This was not just like, oops. Like, this was a really big deal. They were losing their identity as the one and only God lovers. They were losing their identity. Dang. And so Phineas's zealous response and God's response to him is quite unique. The last thing about this Phineas part of the story is that act of violence prevents a greater destruction. It's a very important principle. God is satisfied when Phineas takes on these radical actions. His anger is satisfied. Those deaths, in effect, they spare hundreds of thousands of lives. The death of that couple. Now, that's a foreshadowing of the violence of Jesus crucified on the cross, where the death of one man is going to prevent an even greater destruction, right? So it's kind of interesting. The big problem of this entire passage is what the Bible calls idolatry. Tim Keller, I like his quote on this. He says, idolatry is not just a failure to obey God, it's a setting of your whole heart on something besides God. That's interesting, right? So it's not a failure just to obey God. It's not just a mistake, but it's when we set our whole heart on something besides God. So he wrote this book called Counterfeit Gods. I highly recommend it. It's a great book. And in it, he contends that people, like, the way that we're built, the way that we're broken, in our brokenness and our sin, like, we look for things other than God to find security, meaning, and purpose in our lives. And then when you set your heart on those things, ultimately you lead to disappointment, despair, and destruction. So idols can take so many different forms in our lives. I mean, think about it. Like, it could be money. It could be It could be a car. It could be a house. That thing that we're setting our heart on that's going to bring us joy. It could also be intangible things like popularity, success, the spark of like infatuation when you meet someone special. It could be that. And from that list, man, none of that stuff is bad. It's awesome. It's all actually really, really good. The problem is the yoking part, the slow seduction where that thing becomes the main thing. And we slowly yoke ourselves. And then in effect, what we're doing is we're pushing God out from the center seat that he belongs in. And for us, in that slow seduction, I would say probably one of the trickiest parts when it comes to idolatry is that those idols are very often hidden or disguised in our lives. Actually completely hidden, or they're disguised as something great. We might not even be aware that we're worshiping these things until A, somebody points it out and you get offended, or B, they fail to deliver on a promise. When you actually get that thing, and then it doesn't quite get you what you think it was going to get you. So, and when worshiping an idol, when you hit the bottom, when it fails to deliver, that bottom is like super scary. It can be a depressing place. It can be a really, really hard place. I've been working all this time to get to this place, and then what happens when that feeling doesn't deliver? What happens when the electricity of that relationship fizzles? What happens when you hit your target salary? Yay! And you're still restless. What happens when, man, I've been saving up for 6 years for this dream vacation, and it didn't live up to the hype? Oh. What happens? For a lot of us, what happens is not repentance, not like, oh God, I was paying attention to the wrong thing. What happens is we automatically recalibrate our idols. We're like, oh shoot, well, I just need to straighten up and I need to pick a better one. Different target salary, different destination. And then there you begin the restless practice again. That slow, seductive process. And here's God saying, guys, I'm everything. I've got the mission statement for you. I've got all the meaning right here that you could need. You can hear a lot of wisdom. John the prophet, he says this, 1 John chapter 2. Do not love the world or anything in the world. If anyone loves the world, love for the Father is not in them. And so I think what he's meaning is that thing is taking the place that's reserved for God. He's like, and so when we love the world, when we're embracing a thing, we're embracing even an intangible, it's taking the space that God is supposed to have in our lives. So I think for us, CFC, this begs the question, like, how do we prevent a modern day Midian? Do you know what I mean? Like how do we prevent this slow seductive process from happening to us? How do we prevent ourselves from folding into the culture and being camouflaged by the culture? It's a great question. And there's probably 30 ways that we could talk about. Let me just close with a couple of thoughts on this. One, you need to be vulnerable and invite people into your blind spots. And that's really easy to put on a slide, but it's much different, especially a Lancaster County thing, right? Because there's a powerful desire for us to keep the veneer up. I'm good. And so pulling that veneer down is going to have to be is kind of step one, to invite people in and to be able to say, hey, can you check to see, am I worshiping stuff I shouldn't be worshiping? Am I valuing things that I should not be valuing? Even good things. We need that support and accountability from other people. We need it to help see our own faults. God's not desired us to kind of function just by ourselves. Like we are to function as a community. So I think this one, inviting people to kind of speak truth to you in love, is it requires one of two types of people. Either you are the type of person that is has a lot of emotional maturity, high EQ, or you have a high desperation, right? But in either case, wherever you find yourself, like, it's very, very important that you invite other people in. The second is that our idols need to be flushed out with God's love. Flushed out. The picture I have in my mind is like trying harder. So you've got this like 5-gallon Home Depot bucket full of nasty water. You know, I can work for hours and hours and just keep trying to grab the water out, right? And just over and over and over and over again. And I can probably get some of the water out, but it's still going to be nasty. It's still full of idols, right? So I just keep going. I'm going to keep going. I'm going to work. I'm going to try. That stuff needs to be flushed out. And so I need a bigger bucket full of clean water just to flush out all the nasty. To about a year and a half, 2 years ago, it was on like a really heavy, stormy day like this. The storm water and the sewage in my neighborhood combined, supercharged, is what they called it, and backed up into my house. I have floor drains. Thankfully, it's an unfinished basement, but we had 3 inches of nasty in my house, right? Yeah. And I'm going to tell you this. I didn't use paper towels and fans to clean that up, right? It would have been ridiculous if I was like, hey, listen, you just dab it up. No, I had to re-flood my basement. And I had to add all these cleaning agents. Had to put the PPV on, man. I had to be in it. Like, it needed more. And so, again, we're not, like, I think a lot of times when we're dealing with idolatry, we're just like trying to dab. And it's much worse than that. We need to flood. We need to be flooded with the love of God. Here's the truth statement. God's anger has already been satisfied, that Jesus has taken our place for our sin. He's given us his righteousness. As Bobby likes to often say, he's done the heavy lifting. He's given us purpose. He's saying, I want to root you. You don't need to be adrift. 2 Corinthians 5:17, therefore, if anyone's in Christ, is a new creation. The old has gone away, even when you screw up. The old has gone away. The new has come. And we have a new identity in Christ that we just need to embrace. So how do we flush out the nasty? Well, step one would be prayer. Prayer helps us to overcome idols. Those idols can, if you've been following idols for a while, man, if you've been giving them power in your life, they can have a grip. And so prayer can help release the grip, can give us a sense of hope and a sense of renewal. It can help us acknowledge our own limitations. You and I need to be reminded on a daily basis that God is God and we are not, right? We are not in control. We need to be reminded of that. And I would say that prayer also helps us to keep our impulses and our desires in check. When we commit ourselves, and you wake up in the morning and you say, God, this day is for you. May your kingdom come. May your will be done on earth as is in heaven. I want to follow you, not myself. So, man, that's a powerful way to start your day. So we invite people in. We flush out. Prayer is the first step. And I think we can find hope and comfort in difficult times. I just invite you, if we can dim the lights a little bit, close your eyes here. We're gonna pray together. I want to start off by just reading from Psalm 139, part of Psalm 139. Oh God, you have searched me, and you know me. You know when I sit down, when I rise up. You know my thoughts from afar. You search out my path and my lying down. You are acquainted with all of my ways. God, search us, know us, God, I pray that you would surface in us anything that's offensive. We want you to lead us on this path of righteousness. Lead us to the way everlasting. We want our hope to be in a place that's rooted. We're sick of being adrift. God, meet us. Meet us here in this place. God, we release that thing. We know what that thing is. We know that your love is not about a drip, 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 that you flood us with your love. And so I pray, God, that you would do that. That we would sense your presence, your closeness, and that in that closeness, God, that you would just flood us, replace our trying with your love. May your grace and your peace and your mercy be on us. In Jesus' name, amen.